Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Happy Hour webcast from WhiskyCast.com. I'm Mark Gillespie in the WhiskyCast studio in Haddonfield, New Jersey. Hope you've had a great week so far, and we're ready for the weekend. We have a full panel of writers, bloggers, and contributors joining us today on the Happy Hour webcast. Hope you have poured yourself a dram and are ready to join us for the next hour or so. You can submit your comments in the feedback areas on our Periscope feed, the Facebook page, and our YouTube channel. If you're watching us on Twitter, save your comments until later because we won't see those tweets until after the show is over. Let's bring in our panelists now. We have Carla Carlton, the brand new editor of Bourbon Magazine, Nino KIlgore-Marchetti of the Whiskey Wash, and Chris Ratcliff, our pal who normally is on the other side of the screen causing trouble, but he's going to join us to talk about the project he's working on that you'll get to hear on this weekend's WhiskyCast. How's everybody doing tonight?
Doing all right.
Doing great.
Really good, Mark. Thank you.
So what's in everybody's glass? Carla, let's start with you. And first of all, congratulations on the new gig with Bourbon Plus. We know you're going to do a great job with the magazine.
Thank you so much. I am drinking actually a sample of the new Woodford Reserve Baccarat edition. This is coming out this month. It's cognac finished bourbon. I do not have the crystal decanter from France. Mine came in a little medicine bottle. I'm just drinking it out of a regular glass here, but that's what I'm sampling today.
Did yours come with in the little pretty red box with the bow and the Baccarat tumbler inside?
It did. I did get the Baccarat tumbler, so that was very nice.
That's what I got too, and I haven't opened mine. I haven't opened the sample yet, but I'm going to taste it here in the next day or so. Nino, what's in your glass?
Okay, so today I'm drinking a Glendronach from 1994. So it's 22 years old, and it was fully aged in a Pedro Jimenez cask. So just enjoying that kind of single cask experience that Glendronach can offer with these kind of bottlings, and it is just dessert in the glass, which I'm really digging.
Great. Chris, what's in your glass?
So I've got a barrel pick from the British Bourbon Society, which is a 15-year-old whistle pig rye, which not only do you get all the fancy labeling on the front of the bottle, but if we can see that, that's what the release was called. It's the Raging Boar bottling. And it's
Very nice.
It's 99.7 proof. So it's a bit of a feisty one. Also, I should say hi to everybody in the sidebar, which always feels really odd sitting on this side of the screen rather than on that side of the screen.
And tonight, you guys all get to give Chris grief, as opposed to him giving me grief, which normally happens on these things. Dave Kuhn says, I need this week. Dave, if this is the highlight of your week, man, I feel sorry for you. So let's see here. Nurse Dave's Shaving World. I like the accent that one comes with. Matt, happy Friday, happy hour watchers. And just for the record, I have in my glass a 34-year-old Dalyuen single malt. I think it was from the 2015 Diageo Special Releases series. And very nice. I haven't opened this one up in quite a while, but as you can see, the Angels got more than their share of it while it was sitting on the shelf. So those damned Angels. But cheers, everybody. And
Cheers.
Spirit Bomb, our pal Tabitha, got Bimber Richard Oak tonight. And let's start off with you, Chris, because Bimber is one of the distilleries that has been making a lot of waves over in England. And you're working on a story for us right now that will be, dare I say it, the first ever story that's run on WhiskyCast that somebody else besides me has done.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
congratulations to you on that. It'll be on this weekend's show. But tell us what's going on with a bit about English whiskey, the scene that you're covering with the English Whiskey Festival and all coming up this week virtually, this next week.
It's next weekend, yes. So I spoke with Richard Foster, who founded the English Whiskey Society earlier this year, because he was doing tastings that involved English whiskies and just couldn't find any hub of information. So he's done a couple of tastings. They went well. And he basically went out to the distilleries and said, hey, let's all get together and do a virtual festival. And he's had a really, really good response. He's got 13 distilleries, English distilleries, taking part in the festival. The boutique whiskey guys are there as well, who also do some independent English bottlings. And he was saying in the course of our chat, I mean, if you ask somebody to name 13 English whiskey distilleries, going into this last couple of weeks, I'd have said, I could probably name 8. I thought, 13's doing well. And he went, there's currently 26 all around the country, with a 27th potentially in the works. And, my head just exploded, because even people in England and in the whiskey scene don't realize quite how many whiskey distilleries there actually are now in England, and just how varied and how different they are.
And that's only over the last 15 years, because I think it was 2005 when the Nelstrups opened up the English Whiskey Company at St. George's in Norfolk, right?
Yeah, it was 2006 that they. Okay. It was early 2006 they actually distilled their first spirit, so they were building through 2005. But a lot of distilleries are the last 5-6 years. There's really been a boom in the UK with gin. So a lot of people have been going out and buying stills and trying vodka and rum and gin, and they've gone, well, while we're here, why not also put whiskey mash through and see what happens? And you can see that with some of the distilleries like Adnams, with Spirit of Yorkshire, who actually come from a brewing background. They've put the still in. Adnams is a great example, because they do some fantastic gins, but they almost did the whiskey as a bit of a side project, and they started doing malt whiskies, grain whiskies. They now do a rye whiskey. They've really sort of changed up the mash and trying to see what works. And up and down the country, there's a real mix. If you go to, say, the Lakes, they're very, very Scottish influence, shall we say. And then there is, rye whiskey being made. There's malt whiskey, there's grain whiskey. I'm sure somebody somewhere must be doing a bourbon style whiskey as well. And I have to be honest, and this is slightly kind of to shame on me, but looking at the distilleries that are around in England, I found out there's one 31 miles from my house. And I was floored. So I'm already making plans to go down and say hello. And after you had Bimber on a couple of weeks ago, I've started getting their spirits in, and it's really nice having so many young distilleries who almost kind of by necessity, through interest, through engaging with people like us, allow you to actually see new make spirit and try it, 1-year-old, 2-year-old, and you kind of build up this journey with the distilleries. So it's a really exciting, really vibrant scene, and far bigger than I really thought.
We have a question here from Watchman 999. Is this the largest number of distilleries in the UK ever? I would say in the UK, no, because then you've got to include Scotland and Northern Ireland, and no. But in England, maybe since 1905, right?
So there were 5 distilleries that were recorded in 1887 in Alfred Barnard's book. So were there more before that? Probably. Were they all legal and paying tax and recorded? Probably not. But I think it's probably now more whiskey distilleries than there has probably been legally in the UK, in England, ever, potentially. I think it's quite hard to tell, but certainly as far as we've got records, it certainly looks that way.
Carla, let's switch over to you for a second. Tell us about the promotion that you got to editor at Bourbon Plus, because you had been a contributor from day one. But right. When Fred Minnick decided to step aside, you got the gig.
Yeah, I've actually been managing editor since day one. So it's been exciting to be part of this magazine from the beginning and help build it from the ground up. And as most of you probably know, Fred Minnick has so many things going on that it just makes me tired to talk to him most of the time. And he decided that he wanted to pursue some of those other opportunities. And, I was fortunate to get the nod to become editor, and I'm super excited. I love the magazine. I really like working on it. and getting the opportunity to tell, long form stories about the people and the science and the characters behind bourbon.
And as we all know, the managing editor is the one that really does all the work, right?
Yes, that's the secret's out. I've been doing it all the whole time. Now I just have time.
Did you at least get an ascot out of this? Did they at least give you a Bourbon Plus ascot when you took the gig?
No, I don't do the ascot. Nobody can wear the ascot like Fred. So no, if they'd given me one, I probably wouldn't wear it. But no, I've got my necklace, so I'm good.
Nino, what's happening with the wash these days? I know your readership has been going through the roof, as has pretty much almost every major whiskey site, but you guys have been doing really well too, right?
We have been. The site's been growing really well. We're definitely up in readership month over month, and just seeing tremendous interest in the stories that we're publishing. We've brought on some new writers in writing reviews and news and other things, which has been nice for me because I, for a long while, was carrying the bulk of the writing load. And it's a pleasure to have other people doing some of that now. Of course, that means I'm doing more editing, but hey, I get to test all those parts of my brain for that. The thing that's been interesting about growing the site, starting it as a hobby blog 7 years ago and getting at where it's at now, it's been wonderful. So many contributors and other folks have helped along that way. Now we're in a time where people are looking online and in print for more and more whiskey information. So it's nice to kind of be in that situation of being in the right place at the right time and being able to provide those resources to folks to get what they want for that perfect bottle.
We have a comment from Graham Fraser because Tabitha at Spirit Bomb was complaining that she wants a distillery in England near where she lives. And Graham Fraser says, one on the Isle of Wight and 4 in London, close enough, Tabitha? Tabitha, nope, I want one in Brighton. I don't think you can get real estate for one in Brighton, probably. There's too much resort land down there, right, Chris?
There's quite a lot. But Brighton, I love Brighton because it has a slightly bohemian aspect to it. So there's Hove, where all the millionaires live, just down the coast. But if you get into the middle of Brighton, it can get a bit beautifully weird at times. So I'm sure if you could put a distillery anywhere, somewhere in Brighton would suit very nicely. And they would come up with some probably brilliant rums and absinthes and whiskies and all sorts.
And a lot of Brighton reminds me of certain neighborhoods in Louisville, Carla, because sort of that bohemian area, the artsy arts district, and some of the restaurant districts. The only difference is Brighton's on the beach and you guys are on the Ohio River.
That's right. We're on the river. Yeah, it sounds a lot like Nulu or Bardstown Road, the Highlands.
What's happening in Louisville these days with the distilleries as far as getting people reopened? I know Old Forester is probably not going to reopen until after the beginning of the year, more than likely, but we are starting to see more distilleries reopening to tourists now.
There are, and it's just like everything else. You just have to keep monitoring, the COVID situation. There have been some that have started back and then had to scale back when cases rose. But, I think everybody's been very innovative in doing virtual experiences and continuing, to provide opportunities to pick up limited releases. So we hope we can hang in there, and hopefully this COVID thing will eventually go away or stabilize, and we can open everything back up.
Now, how is that Woodford Reserve Baccarat edition now that you've tasted it?
It is very nice. I am very much enjoying it. It's got, there's a lot of that fruity sort of finish from the cognac finish. I'm enjoying this. I'll be honest, I'm probably not going to spend $2,000 for a bottle of it, but it's great to be able to get a sample.
That may be the most expensive Woodford yet. That's even worse than the $1,000 mint juleps in terms of cost.
Right. It's kind of interesting because what I've seen mostly during the pandemic is a lot of limited releases coming in at lower prices, it seems. But I'm sure there's a market for this. So it'll probably be hard to find too. But I won't be fighting you for it.
Nino, how is yours tonight?
Glendronach is just one of my favorites. I got to tour the distillery a few years ago and taste directly from cask and tasted something very similar to this. So, as we're sitting here talking, I'm sipping from this, I'm like thinking back to that and just Yeah, I love sherry cask whiskey, especially at the end of the day, and this is just nailing it for me.
And how is that Whistle Pig?
It's potent. It's got a fire to it, but it's got a softness as well. It's the iron fist in a velvet glove. I think it's one of the probably one of the softer whistle pigs I've tried. I was unfortunately I had a sample of the Samurai Scientist that was part of a tasting, and that's ruined me now for a lot of others. But those Boss Hog releases are fantastic. But I'm very, very happy with this.
We will have details on the new Boss Hog, the 7th edition, on this weekend's podcast as well. And I'll have my tasting notes for it as well. Folks still complaining about only a gin distillery in Brighton, by the way. And so sooner or later, somebody in Brighton will make whiskey, and we'll cover it at that point. Run this by me. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, talk of a Baccarat decanter Woodford release. Are there many American whiskies now that are really going for those posh releases with the sort of the fancy bottles and what have you, or is it still mostly about the liquid?
I'd say it's still mostly about the liquid. Frankly, I still have a teenage son, the lump finger in my house, so that's me. It's not the juice here that would keep me from buying it. It's the fact that the decanter would last. I'm kind of afraid to even use the little the tumbler that they sent in the sample. But yeah, I think it's most of what I've seen this year has been really focused on the liquid and not so much on the packaging.
We have a few high-end releases here in the U.S., and we're talking above 1,000 American for bottlings, but even those don't necessarily drop in like what this particular Woodford Reserve is. I'm not sure if just the distilleries here in the U.S. aren't into that kind of packaging, or maybe the market here doesn't support domestic whiskeys being like that, but it's not something that you see, in other places. And there's certainly a few exceptions, but for the most part, in Scotland or France, obviously with the cognac and what have you, we just don't see as many super high-end bottles made out of crystal and other things for American whiskey.
I think in this case, and Carla may know the answer to this better, I believe that this was originally intended to be a travel retail release for some of the luxury airports around the world. And then when COVID came and travel cratered, the travel retail market has just been completely wiped out. And I think that's why they're selling this one domestically in the U.S. because if I remember correctly, this is the second Baccarat edition. And I could be wrong about that, but I think the first one was travel retail only. And they may be selling this one in the U.S. just because they can't get anything into travel retail right now.
Right. I think you're right about that.
So let's talk about that, because we're not traveling anymore. None of us have gone anywhere practically. I think I've had one car trip since March for a couple of days. When's the last time you guys hit the road, and when do you expect to travel again? Carla, you first.
Gosh, I have been pretty much working out of my house since March. I'm like you. I took one car trip just for a quick vacation to Michigan in the summer, and rented a house and stayed in the house by myself there, with my family. So it was kind of like being in quarantine, just in a different place. I'm in no huge hurry to travel. I miss it, but of course, Europe doesn't want us to visit, and frankly, rightfully so, the way we've dealt with COVID. So I'm hopeful that someday we'll be able to, to travel across the pond again. But I think I'm waiting for a vaccine, and I'm not even really drinking in bars here. You can, if it's outside, I feel okay with that, but I'm just not even really that comfortable with eating and drinking in an enclosed space. So maybe I'm the exception, but that's kind of where I am on that.
Nino?
So the Whiskey Wash, we're based out of Portland, Oregon. And so my wife and I, one of our kids is up in Washington State, just north of us. So we drove up there for her birthday a few weeks ago. But other than that, it would pretty much just been staying around town and even limiting, going to bars and restaurants and things like that. We've done a lot of the delivery services if we're craving those kind of foods. But the bar scene here in Portland's taken it on the nose for a number of reasons. We've seen a lot of high-end and low-end places just shut completely, which has been unfortunate. Part of that's lack of tourism. We just don't have a lot of people coming here right now because of a range of reasons. Thinking down the road of where I might go next, I don't know. We talked about maybe flying east to visit some of my family for the holidays, but it's hard to say. I don't necessarily like the idea of sitting on a plane for 6 hours with a mask on my face, wondering when someone around me might rip off their mask and go, "I'm masked," or something like that. And just dealing with the stress of that, it's not. I mean, I love travel, but I don't know under these conditions whether it's worth going anywhere or not. So we'll have to see.
Chris?
I think I'm pretty much the same. Been working from home since March. Had a couple of trips with the family, not really going that far, just to break up the monotony a little bit. But yeah, it's very, very odd here. And I think it's not helped by a government who their advice is just changing day to day, town to town, region to region. And the thought of even, going to London and sitting on a train for 2 hours or going into, a crowded restaurant or something like that, it just has no appeal whatsoever. It's just keep your head down. And I think we've been lucky, I think particularly in the whiskey industry, that, we've got the webcast like this, we've got virtual tastings, we've got so much more content now that I think the brands are waking up and the bars and the events companies are waking up and going, we've got to do something, we've got to fill this gap, and there's a demand for it. So I think it's been tough, but I think there's also been a silver lining that it's shifted the world slightly on its axis, and we're now getting opportunities that we wouldn't have had before.
Yeah, I can attest to that to a certain level. The one benefit that has come out of this is that it has forced distilleries to upgrade some of their IT stuff. If you deal with distilleries out in, say, very rural areas of Scotland and Kentucky, they don't exactly have the greatest internet access out in those rural areas. I mean, hell, if you go to Maker's Mark, you can barely get a cell phone signal, depending on which phone service you're on. But
which way the wind's blowing.
I'm sorry, what, Carla?
I said it depends on which way the wind's blowing.
Yeah.
I have a story about Maker's Mark. I traveled there a few years ago, and I made the mistake of going the back way and following my phone's GPS. So, of course,
there's a front way.
I know. Yeah, I know. And I wrote a little.
Every way to Maker's Mark is a back way.
The GPS, of course, the signal drops on the phone, and I hadn't been out to Maker's Mark yet, and so I was like running out the door late for an interview, and I didn't bother to put gas in my car.
Oh no!
So I'm driving, and the phone dropped. I'm watching the gas needle go down, down, down. Luckily, I creep into Loretto on fumes. There's like one little gas station there. Fill up and then drive into Maker's Mark, and they're like, "You're late." I'm like, "Here's why." And they're like, "Oh yeah, that happens all the time." I'm like, "Okay, I don't feel bad."
Well, if you come through Bardstown, they've got the signs leading you to Maker's Mark, the brown tourism signs, but then you're on
all back roads,
and you're drunk, and no, you're not drunk, but you've been drinking, and you're just, it's like,
Carla.
where the go? I don't know where I am.
But the thing is that with the pandemic, it's forced the distilleries to actually get better internet access. Mm-hmm. Because they're all doing their own Zoom things now and putting the distillers online. So it's actually made it easier. I don't have to do as many phone interviews anymore with some of these folks because they've all got good internet now. We can do things on Zoom or here on StreamYard and other platforms where you can get a good quality audio signal out of there, as opposed to having to use a crappy cell phone.
And also, being in the UK, we get access to people in virtual tastings that you wouldn't outside of a big whiskey show. So the British Bourbon Society Whistle Pig tasting had the master blender from Whistlepig, who was kind of on his lunch break or something, given the time difference. But, normally it would have just been a brand ambassador in a small room somewhere, and to have that access and be able to ask questions and things like that for a fan to be able to reach out to somebody in a different country to a distillery that you really like is, there's so much value in that. It's tremendous.
Nino, what are you seeing in your coverage outside of the U.S.? Because Whiskey Wash also covers whiskeys from all over the world. What are you seeing
In terms of
changes since the pandemic?
I think kind of what's being reflected as we're talking about is that generally there has been a shift in the way the distillery industry operates professionally as well as with tourism. I mean, the stories that have been coming out of Scotland that we've been writing about, where distilleries were shut and then they've reopened under certain situations, and the economic impact that's had across the industry has been really hard, especially for some of the more remote distilleries that people want to travel to but they can't. And then the fact that American tourism has been cut off from going most rest of the world, go team, is hurt those areas even more. And we still have the tariff issue going on. I know there was something that was just published the other day where the industries are calling for the tariffs to be removed, but that's still dragging out. So I think, like, just looking at the general global condition of the whiskey industry, it's hanging in there, but I think it's definitely a lot more shaky with all these factors going on. I'm glad to see not too many have closed yet, but I know here in the US, we've seen a number of the craft distilleries crash out, unfortunately, because of different things in different states, because we have 50 states, 50 different ways of looking at how this all goes, and some states are more easy on their industries than others. I know there's been some hoo-ha in Texas, for example, about regulations around whether distilleries can be open or not, and the distillery industry there is up in arms because the governor's not been giving them what they were asking for.
And I thought it was funny when the Texas whiskey folks put out a tweet the other day, sort of sarcastically ripping the governor, because apparently Anheuser-Busch donated something like 80,000 gallons of hand sanitizer to be used at the polling places around Texas, and going, wait a second, the Texas distillers were making hand sanitizer all along, and you can't show us some love? So, and they did the same thing in Kentucky too. They sent it out through Governor Beshear's office. They sent that, Anheuser-Busch sent all this hand sanitizer out to the polling places in Kentucky, when the Kentucky distillers have been making hand sanitizer all along.
Absolutely.
So,
if I can just ask, being again the non-American here,
go ahead.
I know in the last episode, Mark, you were talking about the tax relief on, is it stored whiskey or whiskey when it's bottled?
It's when it's removed from bond for sale, when they take it out of the bonded warehouse to sell it, and then to bottle it and sell it. That's when they pay the tax.
So, being this close to an election, at what point does the government stop sitting and stop voting on these things? Does that carry on right up to the election? Right. And then
they're
nothing
not
really
voting on
happens
anything.
Until
Whiskey or the Supreme Court, apparently.
They're not voting on anything other than maybe a Supreme Court nomination, maybe a COVID relief package before November 3rd. They might come in a week or so after the election for the lame duck session through early December. That's when they have to get various things like another budget extension passed and extend all these tax breaks that will expire at the end of the year. That's when the distillers are going to be lucky if they get it through in that lame duck session, because it depends on how the election goes and what kind of carnage we see in American politics after the election. And I'm using that term loosely.
One thing that
go ahead, Carla.
Legally that I hope will continue is the changes that have been made to allow takeout cocktails and delivery. I had some stuff delivered to the house from Mile Wide Brewery here in Louisville, and I was like, this is awesome. I didn't have to leave my house, So I hope some of that continues, although what's missing, I mean, you can always access alcohol to drink at home. You can make cocktails at home up to a point. At least I make pretty basic cocktails, but it's just kind of the whole atmosphere of, being able to go to a bar and just hang out and, share a dram with friends. That's what's really missing. When that's going to come back. Like, I can't even imagine. You look back now, remember when they used to put bowls of peanuts on the bar and everybody would eat? I mean, now you're like, why did we ever do that? Like, I'm never doing that again. But I know some places here have reservations. You have to come in and sit at your table and not move around and then leave at a certain time. And that's just really not the traditional bar going experience. So I don't know how you guys feel, but that's definitely something that I am missing about, it's not even so much the drinking, but just gathering and talking with friends and hanging out for however long you decide to hang out with them.
Yeah, it's a shame when you can't just go down to the local pub, sit down for a beer, watch some sports on TV with friends, and just relax and kick back. Because, I mean, I can sit here in my office and sit in the recliner and watch a hockey game on TV with a cold beer, but it's not the same as being around people. And I think that's what we miss is it's just the camaraderie, because you can do this stuff on Zoom, but it's still not quite the same.
And now when you go to a bar, you're not relaxing. You're thinking, am I going to die? It's just not very relaxing when you have to have a mask on.
It depends state by state, right? Here in Oregon, for example, we aren't allowed to have cocktails to go with alcohol in them. You can buy the kits and make your own at home, but because we're a control state, it's still done a little backwards in some regards. But that being said, bars and restaurants have been allowed to have, at least here in Portland, outdoor seating. And so they've all taken advantage of that as much as possible to put more people in, but we're still going under social distancing guidelines. And so you can only have so many people sitting. Right. And some of the restaurants and bars that are smaller, they've never reopened, and like some of them still have their names and what have you on the door front, but depending on how long this all stretches for, I don't know if they're ever going to reopen. And that's really the hard thing.
And it's October 9th, and probably we've got maybe another month of potentially good outdoor weather in most cities where you could actually want to sit outdoors.
Oregonians love to sit out in the weather to an extent, but I don't know if full meals under tinted conditions are going to be a thing. Maybe I've seen like some photos on social media of some restaurants that are doing those bubble things where it's like your table and then you're under a big bubble that the server pops in and out of. So maybe that with the heater, who knows?
Wow.
But yeah.
Interesting.
To bring in customers, right?
Love this comment from Nurse Dave's Shaving World. Having gotten into scotch during COVID, I miss being able to try things without buying the whole bottle. Yeah, we're not doing tastings in liquor stores anymore, and a whole lot of festivals. I know of only one that's happened in the U.S., and that was just about a month ago at the Whiskey and Barrel Night in Paramus, New Jersey. And fortunately, we have still not heard of a single COVID case that came out of that. So, as our pal Tyrone Cote in Nova Scotia points out, outdoor seating is going to require heaters and shovels soon in Canada.
When the smoking ban...
What?
Sorry, go on.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, when the smoking ban came in Britain, a lot of pubs were building these outdoor spaces with heaters up on the wall and what have you, so people could go out and smoke. And I think the places that have got those heaters now are probably going to be in a relatively good position compared to some of the others.
Yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong, are the bars, I know the bars in Scotland had to shut back down for a couple of weeks here, or at least I know the bars in Ireland are shut down through near almost the end of the month. What's the latest up in Scotland that you know of, Chris?
So central Scotland, so basically if you draw an oval between Edinburgh and Glasgow, all the bars and restaurants there that serve alcohol, the restaurants that serve alcohol are closed until October 25th. The bars outside of that, so out in the sort of more rural areas, are still open.
All the fun ones.
All the fun ones. And in England, there's a 10 p.m. curfew that has been imposed for some reason. But there's a lot of nervous glances particularly in the restaurant industry, who have reopened, carrying perishable stock, trying to sort of coax people in. And in Britain, they had a scheme, a month ago or 2 months ago. What was it? Eat Out to Help Out, which got many comments on social media. And it was basically, if you have a meal, then the government will give £10 towards the meal for each person attending, to try and encourage people to go out and eat in restaurants. And it helped the hospitality industry. And now people are going, wait a minute, why were you encouraging people and subsidizing people to go into these closed spaces? And we're now seeing COVID cases spiking back up to where they were kind of in March or so. So it's been a really tricky thing to balance, I think, across the whole hospitality industry here. But just going back to the virtual festivals, because we're just coming out of now what would have been Whisky Live London. I'm not quite sure what the official name for it was.
The Whisky Show London, not Whisky Live.
Sorry, Whisky Show London. We've got the Whisky Lounge and the English Whisky Festival next weekend, who are both running multi-day festivals. I'm very interested to see what the feedback is, and I know I've seen some people saying that the Whisky Show Virtual was a success, because having so many sessions where each session comes with a tasting pack and it's all very guided, but not having that opportunity to just go talk to brands, talk to ambassadors, meet other people outside of kind of a structure like this. I'm very curious to see what people think kind of at the end of this month about the virtual festivals as opposed to just single tastings.
We have this comment from Graham Fraser. He just bought the festival ticket for the Whisky Show London. No samples. Best £30 he's spent all year. Fab whiskey education and debates, interaction, as well as tastings. And I'm glad you enjoyed it. I know that the sessions I was involved with that show, I had fun doing it. Graham said it was an amazing week. Many of those sessions may appear on the Whiskey Exchange's YouTube channel in a couple of weeks. I know they are on YouTube right now, if you know where to search, if you have the right links, because that's what they were using to feed the stuff in the Whiskey Show's online portal. So I suspect we will see those on the Whiskey Exchange's YouTube channel. But the only other show that I know of right now in the U.S. that's happening is the Whiskey Obsession Festival in Tampa, coming up November 4th. And it's run by the same folks that ran Whiskey and Barrel Night in Paramus a couple of weeks ago. And they're working under Florida's guidelines, which are pretty well opened up right now. I mean, they've opened up sports stadiums to 100% capacity if the teams want to put them in there. And I'm going, wow. Okay, yeah, that's a brilliant idea, guys.
Well, we'll see it here in Kentucky next, the 15th. The Kentucky Bourbon Festival is virtual this year for the first time.
Yeah.
And so it'll be interesting to see. They're essentially selling some VIP packages where you get limited edition glassware, the poster, some other things, and then you also get admission to next year's in-person, we hope, festival. But it'll be it's sort of the same thing, a lot of educational sessions. I do believe that they're going to still run my favorite event, which is the barrel rolling competition. They're not doing it.
They're not doing it. We thought the same thing, and then they changed their mind because the distilleries were worried about bringing their own teams together from different facilities and different warehouse crews. They didn't want to take that chance.
Yeah, that's smart. It's too bad because that is my favorite event. It's free every year to watch these teams that practice all year roll these barrels around a course.
Full disclosure, my goodie pack arrived from the Bourbon Festival today with one of the Bourbon Festival Glencairns, so I am drinking out of that. And if I can reach it here, the bourbon socks.
Oh, bourbon socks are great.
And I don't know if you can see these, but with little barrels and glassware on them. So yes, those are. And I dropped the card that has the maker on them, so I can give them proper credit. Barrel Down South, folks. So we'll show that on there, and I'll, when I get the chance to put these on, maybe I'll tweet out a photo of me wearing them. But that was in the goodie bag as well. So thanks to the Bourbon Festival folks, and we hope that goes off next week, and hope it goes off well.
I have to wonder with these festivals that are happening virtually now, when we reach whatever the new normal will be, will the festivals continue the streaming option as a choice for those that can't or don't want to go? Because not everyone's just going to immediately be like, I want to go to all the festivals again. I think we're going to have a period when we finally get to vaccines and what have you, where a lot of people are like, either I don't want to get vaccinated or I have, but I'm not comfortable yet going into these crowds. Yeah. And even beyond that, I think this is the new revenue stream for these festivals. Something they consider keeping, because not everybody, again, can make it or wants to go. And hey, look, here's a new chance for a new base of folks that want to check it out.
I think that's a perfectly good idea. If you can sell the web stream and sell tickets to it and make it an exclusive, for instance, when Whiskey Fest New York, you may not want to travel to New York City, but if you can log on from home and watch the master classes, at least, that might be worth $25-$30 to sign up for that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I know here, I also work here at a private university here, and there are some things like our reunion weekend this summer we couldn't have in person, obviously. So we had I helped lead a cocktail making class with Fred No from Beam, and it was a virtual class. And normally we would draw people, alums from the greater Louisville area, but we drew 500 people from all over the country. So some of these things I think do work really well as virtual events, because you are able to draw people from a much wider area than would maybe, as you said, drive to your event. They're able to attend virtually. So I felt the same way about the political conventions this year. People were saying, oh my gosh, it's going to be terrible, but only if you wanted to go wear your red, white, and blue crazy outfits. I mean, I enjoyed it much better. I hope they continue to do the conventions that way, because I felt like I was there and I could focus on what I wanted to focus on and not all the, crazy people. So
those things have been obsolete for years. And yeah. I thought the virtual idea was perfect for it, because it allowed for a lot less gathering and a lot more content and a lot more unique content. We had somebody suggesting that wanting to know if the socks tasted of bourbon. No, they don't. And people are going, does the bourbon taste like socks? And then somebody suggested that, well, Pappy certainly does taste like socks. Let's talk about that for a second, because we got the word this week from Buffalo Trace, Carla, that the annual Pappy Van Winkle Pappy Palooza is about to start, and the begging and pleading, and I know, Nino, you've had to deal with this too, of people going, where I can get some Pappy? Do you know how I can get it?
Or can you?
So what are we going to see this year?
That's a good question. I know a lot of retailers here in Louisville have gone to a lottery system, because it was the only way they could fairly do it without making anybody mad. You have the customers who are there all year saying, I should get it because I come here all the time. Then you have the newbies saying, if you do that, I'll never get it. So a lot of them have gone to these lotteries, but that's a huge gathering of people. So I can't imagine they're going to do that this year. So I don't know if they'll do a virtual lottery. I haven't really heard yet.
And is the one bar in Louisville that has traditionally done Pappy and Jell-O shots just because they could? You know the one I'm talking about. You know if they're going to do that again this year?
I don't know, but I kind of salute them. I thought that was kind of great.
Nino, your thoughts on the Pappy madness?
I think what's interesting, Buffalo Trace put out their press release this week, and most of the recent years we've seen the caveat of, don't buy this stuff on social media, don't buy it through private groups, etc. And maybe I've missed it in other years, but they had what seemed to be like a new caveat this year, where they were calling out retailers and saying, if you're aware of a retailer that's overcharging, contact your state attorney general's office. And then they linked to a federal list of the websites of the state attorneys general, and I was like, wow, I didn't expect Buffalo Trace to be like that, but I think maybe they're kind of tired of taking it on the nose every year where they say, look, here's the MSRP, and we kind of expect that, yeah, they'll be overpricing in some of the secondary groups. But frankly, like if you go online and look at retailer prices, as a lot of them do list their inventories, they're pretty overpriced as well. You know, you see these 23-year-olds for $3,000 or whatever, and that's on a retail site, and you're like, what are you doing? But it's just reflective of how the Van Winkle whiskeys, even as the whiskey industry itself continues to mature with bottlings, you know, from some of the craft guys and the big guys and all these others, these still will continue to hold that collectible cult status because it's so deeply ingrained now.
Oh, I can just imagine the state attorneys general are just going to love that press release. Like they don't have more important things to worry about than somebody get overcharging for Pappy, for crying out loud. Yeah. Although I got to admit, there's a special place in hell for retailers that gouge.
I mean, they haven't raised that MSRP for years. You know?
No, and there's
yells at Buffalo Trace, and it's like, it's not Buffalo Trace. You know, I mean, and if people are paying $3,000 a bottle, are the reason it's happening.
I'll give you an example. There's a liquor store about 1.5 miles away from here in the next town over. Those clowns have had, and I'm using that term literally, clowns, and you'll understand why when you hear this. They have had in their display case, in the locked case, a bottle of the basic 10-year-old Old Rip Van Winkle bourbon. List price like $69.99 a bottle. These sumbitches have been trying to sell that thing for $699 for the last year, and that thing has not moved, and personally, I hope it never does.
Yeah.
Because anybody that thinks they're going to sell it for that is an idiot, and anybody that would buy it for that is an even bigger idiot. Let's see here. Tyrone asks, is Pappy even the best bourbon in the U.S.? Oh, hell no, it's not even the best. Hell yes, it's not. Hell no, it's not even the best bourbon in the U.S. It's not even the best bourbon in Kentucky, for crying out loud. It's not bad, but it's not.
Yeah, I wouldn't turn it down. If you want to give me a bottle of 23, I'll take it. But yeah, I agree. I mean, and 23 is by far not my favorite. I'm not a big fan of the tannic. I just, the last time I was able to sample it back when remember when there were these stores where you could go and get samples of stuff? That was in the old times. I thought, well, maybe I haven't tried it for a while, so I paid way too much for this whole sample of 23. And I'm like, nope, I still, if I had my choice of all of them, I would go with the 12 or the 15, and I probably would buy something else entirely. But
yeah,
it's just because of it's an amazing marketing job. I had a friend stand in one of those big lines one year, and I said, you don't even drink bourbon, and she said, I know, but I like to buy stuff that's hard to find. And I said, okay, we're the problem. We have.
I would pay list price for it. It's good enough to pay list price for. Mm-hmm. And if you can find it in some of the control states, Utah was, believe it or not, great for this because they always sell it at list price when it's available because it's a control state. And I think Virginia does the same thing. Not in Pennsylvania anymore because they got permission to start jacking up prices for certain things. And of course, Pappy, they went through the roof on. But let's see here. Donner Past Whiskey. If Buffalo Trace really wanted to get control of overcharging, they would go after distributors who require stores to buy 14,000 of the cheap product to get one bottle of the Antique Collectioner Pappy. Many stores have this. They can't do that in most states because technically it's illegal for them to punish the retailers for overcharging. That's why they're telling you to go to the attorneys general, because they can't do it themselves. But that isn't. I did not see that in the news release this time around, but I got to go look for that because
I was a little shocked. I mean, I was just gonna, when I was writing that story, I was just kind of writing the kind of generic da 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 da, and then when I saw that, I was like, "Ooh, what is this?" They're just like they're not hardball this year, but you can't blame them. Yeah, I mean, whatever we think about whether they're marketing practices or what, it's still bad publicity for them to have this happen year over year, because so many people, as many people are like, I love Pappy, many more people are like, Buffalo Trace is the problem here. Are they? Hard to say. I don't know. I'm not trying to defend them, but I think like they take more of the share of the hit on the nose than they should, perhaps.
Well, for a while, they were encouraging people to break their bottles of Pappy when they emptied them, because people were buying empty bottles, on the secondary market and filling them and trying to pass them off as Pappy. So, it's just, I was at some flea market and there was an empty bottle of Pappy for like, $50 or something.
Go on
empty.
Go on eBay and run a search on Van Winkle bottles that are empty and look at how some of them bid up in these auctions. And you're like, they're empty bottles, people, stop.
Exactly.
What do you put in them, flowers that are gold plated? Please.
I really like what.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Chris.
I really like what Master of Malt did with the Yamazaki sherry cask a few years ago. They did a blog post where they said, right, we've been allocated 3 bottles. 1 bottle will do a lottery. If you win the lottery, you get it at list price. Bottle number 2, we're going to split that up into samples, and there'll be a lottery for those. And again, you can buy it for sort of reasonable money if you get the thing. The 3rd bottle, we're going to auction it off. So whatever the secondary market price is, that's what it'll reach. However, there are 2 caveats. 1, anything above the recommended retail price gets donated to charity. And I think the charity was WaterAid, but I might be wrong. The other thing that they will do is they will write in marker pen this whole speech over the back label of the bottle. And there was even calls for them to sort of break the seal on it and reseal it so that, it cannot go to an auction as a collectible. You basically have to promise to open it, drink it, share it, and a charity benefits from the secondary market rather than a speculator.
Let's move on now. Graham has a question for you, Carla. I explored getting Bourbon Plus magazine mailed to me in the UK, but the postage was going to cost as much as the magazine. Can Carla look into that? Now, I know that's above your pay grade. That's the publishing folks at Cubby Rides.
It's worth every penny, Graham. But I've had that. We've had that question before, and I will definitely look into that because I would love to have Bourbon Plus go all over the world. But yeah, I will look into that.
Are there digital copies available? Tabitha was asking about that.
There are not at this moment. Our publisher is very much focused on the print product. So our website at this time is very focused on just promoting subscription. I would like to bulk up the website. That's one of the things I'd like to explore as editor. But at this particular time, there's not a digital edition available.
What else do you want to cover with them? Go ahead, Chris.
I will say US Postal is really expensive for shipping anything. It's not just not just a Bourbon Plus magazine. Anything that you want to buy from the US, the shipping is always really, really expensive.
Oh yeah, tell me about it. I just pretty much covered the Postal Service deficit for a month today, shipping out Whiskey Club of the Month glasses to one of our recent winners from Ireland. It was like $85 for a 10-pound box of 24 Glencairns.
My God.
And glad to do it, but yeah, it's expensive, and I get that, guys.
Whereas here in the U.S., we have these very reasonable postal prices, but your package never gets there.
Yeah. So you can pay a little bit and for no service at all.
That's right, and it doesn't arrive. Now,
I did mail my ballot today for the election.
That's good.
I dropped it off today with that package, and I'm hoping it gets to across the county in time for the election on November 3rd. I have no idea. I have no doubts that it will. I'm kidding about this, but this is good. From Bill Ricker, the Plowed Society, and these are the folks that run Ardbegeddon, the best whiskey event you've never heard of or been invited to. It's a private whiskey event held in a certain western city in the U.S. in January that is famous for its casinos. And I'll not go into any more details because I'd like to sort of be invited to one of these days. But Plowed has a self-inking rubber stamp that gets applied to the labels of all of its bottle kills to assure that the recycling actually gets to the recycling plant, so that the empty bottles don't wind up, as other folks have suggested, being filled up with fake whiskey and sold and resold as something after that. But I like that idea. A self-inking rubber stamp that just says, used bottle, don't buy this.
Mm-hmm.
What other anti-counterfeiting techniques would you use besides maybe putting razor blades around the edge of the cork or something like that to keep the counterfeiters?
Boy, I'm not coming to your house for Halloween this year.
I'm sorry, what was that, Carla?
I said I'm not coming to your house for Halloween this year.
I would never do that with Halloween candy, but with an empty bottle, I mean, I should be, and I don't do this when I throw the bottles out for recycling. I should be smashing them,
Mm-hmm.
because with the full bottles that I do get every so often, I could easily see somebody sneaking into the recycling and grabbing them and refilling them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I take my recycling out the morning before the morning of the trash collection to make sure that the stuff goes right into the back of the truck. But I could see that people stealing.
I think if you're breaking bottles, Mark, I think there can be issues with the people then have to handle it.
Yes.
If they are. So what I've done in a couple of cases, one is get a proper glass drill bit, and if you like drill into the bottom of the bottle, make it into a lamp or something else, but it's irreversible. Or the other thing you can do is if you get a pipe cutter and just like go around the neck or something, it's really, really easy, really quick and safe to do. But it means that the stopper will never go back in. It's obviously damaged, but you've got two safe pieces to then be processed and handled.
That's a great idea. And other folks are pointing out that this is happening with Daft Mill in the UK, Chris. I know that the Daft Mill guys have been their whiskey is in so much demand because they held on to it for 12 full years before they bottled their first cask. So they held on to it. And as Ricker points out, the recycling truck usually breaks the glass anyway. But let me ask this one to Carla and Nino. If you could sell a counterfeit, what would be the one American whiskey other than Pappy that would be worth counterfeiting? I'm not sure there is one.
I don't know. I mean, people go crazy over the Buffalo Trace Antique Collection. Maybe some of those limited, birthday bourbon. I would think maybe the limited edition kinds of things.
Some of the limited Four
I would
Roses.
never do that. So.
Yeah, the Four Roses, like the Al Young edition from a couple of years ago, like that.
It's funny because when you look at what goes on in the secondary market and some of the retailers, there's a lot of price speculation, I think. When you get away from the ones we know as American whiskey will get that kind of top dollar, the BTAC, the Pappy, Winkle stuff, kind of those things, it starts to get very speculative. You look at some of those bottles that you're seeing people are trying to sell, and you're like, I don't really think anyone's going to pay that for that. Good luck with that. It really is just, what for some of those things, what is it people are willing to part with for that bottle? It's a very interesting question. What's collectible beyond the stuff that we know is a collectible in American whiskey these days?
Ricker points out, Mark, you'd want to counterfeit pre-Prohibition bottles. Carla, have you gotten to try any pre-Prohibition whiskey? I'm sure you have at some point, right?
I have at some events. I was at one event where they found two bottles in an old home it had sold, and there was a door that said something like "Caution High Voltage," but it really was a secret bunker for whiskey and wine and things. So one of them was absolutely delicious. I can't remember the brands now. One of them was horrible, and it wasn't clear whether oxygen had gotten into the bottle or if it just was horrible when it was bottled. But the one that was really good was really, really good. And the other one, you could just tell as soon as you brought it to your nose, you're like, I don't really think I want to put this in my mouth.
Yes, you could counterfeit those, but the problem is it's really hard to fake the tax stamps and make it look antique because, you can copy them in a digital printer, but you can't make the paper look that
Right.
antique. So that would be kind of hard to do. But I got to admit, I've not tried many pre-prohibition whiskeys, but most of them you wouldn't want to try anyway, for the most part, I think. But Dave Kuhn would love to counterfeit a Bowmore 1957. Yeah, you and me both. But
All right, Mark, a question for you.
sure.
When you're determining what you're going to drink for the happy hour podcast or webcast here, what do you pick, or how do you determine what you're going to drink from that vast collection you have behind you going down the wall? Because obviously, it's different each week, I assume. So
Yeah. I usually, I don't pick anything that has anything to do with a guest. I don't play favorites because I've got multiple guests on the show. So I don't want to pick a whiskey from one and not the others. So usually what I did with this week was I looked across behind the camera to the other cabinet and realized that, oh, gee, I haven't tried that 34-year-old Daluane in a long time. And so that's why I picked
Casually dropped in there to the other cabinet, which
Mark,
is
I've got this narrow office.
I was going to ask, have you ever given a virtual tour of your office? Have people ever seen what your interior studio looks like?
I've
like,
posted
how do we know
pictures.
that's not a poster behind you?
What?
Okay, all right.
Okay, see, this is not the fake green screen zoom
Well,
back.
Okay.
We need a 360 camera for one of these webcasts, and people can just scroll around and
Yeah, and then you'd see all
everything.
the crap that I've got around the office because I haven't vacuumed in here in 2 weeks because I've got cables all over the floor. And I've got boxes because our daughter and son-in-law are getting ready to move into their own house. So all of the boxes that have come in from whiskeys, samples and stuff, we've been saving so they can pack stuff up in to move. So yeah, this is the cleanest part of the office is this desk I'm sitting at because the rest of it looks like a bomb got dropped off in here.
As long as this bit is clean.
But Ricker has
then-
seen it and he verifies it.
It's real. Okay.
It's real. Milt's been down here. He's seen it. And he also notes that Prohibition, pre-licensed and pre-Prohibition distilled pints appear in the Skinner auctions regularly. Yeah, Joe Hyman at Skinner is really good about sourcing some of these pre-Prohibition bottles for his auctions and is able to authenticate 99.5% of them. And Tabitha wants, whiskey cribs. Yeah, let's do whiskey cribs at some point here.
Isn't that the joy of all these webcasts, though? How many of these have you spent half your time looking behind the person going, that their office looks great?
Yeah. Well, there's that whole room, rate my Skype room or something like rate my Zoom room on Twitter where they actually issue ratings for the folks that wind up on doing these online interviews for the various news networks. And it's for some reason, people who had a pineapple or a plant in the background got a higher rating for a while. There was a trend for him to get a pineapple in there. So as a smart ass thing one time, I stuck a pineapple on the shelf back here just for and submitted the picture saying, okay, I put the pineapple here. Can I at least get a 9 out of 10 now? Let's see.
The British version of that is credible bookcases. So whenever a politician is on the news, people scan along the bookcases behind them, looking for political philosophies and all that sort of thing.
And Graham Fraser points out, did anyone see Sukhinder Singh's whiskey collection video this evening? Wow, nearly 1,000 bottles of Port Ellen alone. Yeah, Sukhinder's got more whiskey than anyone I know.
And does own Whiskey Exchange, if I remember.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And he's also one of the biggest whiskey collectors around, too. And Dave Kuhn, the best is to screenshot the room of the people you're on Zoom with and then make that your virtual background.
Great tip.
You got to Photoshop the other people out of the image.
We'd be like, can you step
Well,
away?
I'm in my husband's office. So I've got Louisville side. I'm in the Louisville room because his Wi-Fi was better than my Wi-Fi at home.
Well, and the whole thing is, Carla, I mean, yeah, the Bardstown folks are going to be mad because you didn't have a Bardstown sign back there.
Well, get over it.
And as Tabitha points out, there's a whole building in Scotland shaped like a pineapple. Okay, I think we've pretty much killed everybody's time for tonight. We've We've wasted enough bandwidth for the evening, so I really want to thank our guests. Carla Carlton, the new editor of Bourbon Plus magazine. Carla, I can't wait to see what you do with the thing.
Thank you.
It'll be an ascot-free zone from this point forward, right?
And I'll look into that shipping to the UK. No promises, though.
And Nino KIlgore-Marchetti from the Whiskey Wash. Thank you, Nino, as well. And Chris Ratcliff, I want you to stay on the line because we need to talk about that piece that's going to run.
We do. Thank you.
So I want you to stay on the line because the boss is going to jump on it. She has some feedback to offer. So
excellent.
So I kid, of course, but Chris, I do need you.
My connection just froze. You know.
Okay. Hey, thanks again for joining us, gang. I appreciate it. We have had a lot of fun, and please take good care of yourselves this weekend. We'll be back with the Whiskey Wednesday webcast this coming Wednesday. And again, I want to thank our guests, Carla Carlton, Nino KIlgore-Marchetti, and Chris Ratcliff for joining us. And thank you for watching. We'll see you on Wednesday, and we'll have the WhiskyCast podcast up this weekend. Take care of yourselves, wear your masks, stay 6 feet away from each other, and be good to each other. Good night, all.